All right, thank you everyone for logging in to the third business development webinar. If you haven't been to the previous ones, don't worry. All of these are being recorded and they will be made available at some point, probably through YouTube or something like that. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So today's presentation is titled Jobs to be Done, an early look to competitors. Now, if you were here for the first week, you might recall that we talked about jobs to be done then, and we'll be reviewing a little bit of that now, kind of revisiting it and applying it in a different context, not so much using it as a way to define our company early on, but rather as a way to figure out who truly are our competitors, who should we consider to be our competitors. So with that, what are we covering? Of course, the review of jobs to be done, using that to identify who our competitors are, and that's a fairly quick part. And then doing some pretty high level competitor analysis to try to hone your product, essentially using tips from people in your industry or around your industry to hone your product, your initial one at least. So with that, rather than solving a problem with the jobs to be done mindset, we are defining our company as one that merely executes a job that the market needs to be done. So I'll give you an example. The Nintendo Switch does not solve our current pandemic, but it does execute the job of filling up our abundant free time, which has been created by the pandemic. So, it would be wrong of me to say that Nintendo has solved coronavirus, but they are still doing a job, that has been created by this issue. So that's just one kind of relevant current example. So why do we do this? This shift in mindset, in my experience, often yields a less abstract thought process, which can help you get a product more quickly and hopefully you can get a better product. If you were here for the first week, you may remember things were a little bit esoteric. They're kind of in the air, they were floaty, they were abstract. In this past week, I tried to make things a lot more concrete. And so similarly, jobs to be done is a way of taking a problem which can seem complicated and very hand wavy and putting it into terms, defining it in terms that are very easy for anyone to understand. Solving the pandemic is a big problem, and it's difficult to wrap your head around. But executing the job of making people happier is a much easier one to think about. So, with the traditional approach, the problem solution approach, which is certainly a good one in a lot of applications. So to give you an example, maybe my problem is I don't feel secure in my home. And this is an example that we're going to be talking about a lot today. So with that, some potential solutions are, well, maybe I could have a more homey home. Maybe I should make my home feel more like a home, then I'll feel more secure, right? Sure, that's true, but how are you going to actually build and execute and deliver a product based on that? Alternatively, maybe I should see a therapist to resolve some internal issues. Maybe the issue isn't my home or my neighborhood, maybe it's me. Either of these aren't really conducive to startups. You could argue that you could build startup out of these, but it's not immediately clear what that path is. And so maybe this traditional problem solution approach isn't best. Now, if we shift over to the jobs to be done approach, maybe our job to be done is instead of, I don't feel secure, it's I need a way of feeling more secure. Well, just that very quick shift, which is a very small kind of change in wording, we're able to say, well, hey, maybe our potential products are just home monitoring, so you always know what's happening in your house, or physical home security, just a very direct, you could argue traditional measure to adding security. And so these products would be probably easier to design and implement, not necessarily because the products themselves are simpler, but because they're better defined, because you know what you're working towards. When you're working towards this big goal, this giant like idea, it's like, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to get there? You really have to massage the problem, break it down, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of mental energy and effort, and it might not be the best way to approach things. With this approach, ideally, if the problem it lends itself well, it's much more direct. So, are there any immediate questions on jobs to be done? Okay, cool. Yeah, I feel like it's pretty straightforward. So with that, we understand jobs to be done. We understand that in order to build a company, we need to be doing a job, which makes sense. Like you hire a company to do a job um, in the most traditional sense. You hire a pest control company to get rid of your pest, do a job. So why should we think of startups in any different way? So competitors are absolutely not carbon copies of your company, but rather other firms which are doing your job. And what I mean by that is, if you look at Uber and Lyft, that is a really good example of competitors. It's an easy one to understand, rather, because they're doing the same thing. There's practically zero difference between the service that Uber is offering and the service that Lyft is offering. Maybe there's a difference in their pricing schemes, or their driver relations, or how they do business, but ultimately they're kind of the same company. Um, so if you had that sort of mindset when it comes to competitors, and you were, say, Lyft or Uber, or it doesn't matter, in your mind, you're going to think, my only competitor is the other company, is Uber, is Lyft. But that is kind of a limited mindset, because it leaves you exposed to insurgent companies, insurgent firms, or even not even businesses, but just ideas or practices that consumers adopt that might subvert your business. So an example of the Uber Lyft scenario is, maybe I just walk home instead. So that's a very simple thing that there's nobody profiting off of that. There's no direct competitor, but nevertheless, it's something that a company needs to be aware of. So to identify which firms are truly competitors, what we're going to do in a minute is kind of make a table of a bunch of potential competitors, what they do, and additional information. And then that is going to kind of directly transfer over to the high level competitor analysis. So I'll give you an example, a real quick example of what I mean. So we're going to be talking about the home security job to be done today. That's kind of a lot of the examples, or what a lot of the examples will be on. So an example of a competitor, again, not a business, but an item, moats, from the 15th century or whatever. We're going to say that these are potential competitors because they act as a physical barrier to your home or your castle, if you're King Louis or whatever. And just some notes, they're impractical, they're very scarce, and they're no longer culturally acceptable. You just can't have them anymore. You can't be an SJ and build a moat around your house. The permits aren't going to go through. Your neighbors are going to look at you funny. So with that, I'm going to get out of this presentation and hop over to the worksheet. So what I'd like to do is pick on a few of you and start building out this list. So I'm just going to go based on what my screen says. Richard, do you want to give me an example of a competitor that we might identify, in the context of home security, and then, what they do and any additional notes?
I don't know any home security.
Well, It's not necessarily like what are incumbent companies, what is out there, but if you needed to secure your home, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Cameras.
Cameras. Awesome. So what do cameras do?
They like record live footage and you can stream it on your phone.
Live footage can stream to mobile devices. Perfect. Do you have any notes on, this application in general, things that we should be aware of?
There may be like potential hackers that can like log in to your accounts and like stream your home because it is on the web, or like
Right.
they do it based on an app.
Okay. Yeah, I think I
So
heard
I guess that would
something.
be like the cost of convenience.
Let's see if I can spell convenience. I think that's right. Cool. Thank you. Parth for it.
I was thinking maybe dogs.
Dogs. Okay. And what do
Yeah.
dogs do?
They, stand guard.
What else?
I guess they attack if an intruder comes.
What I think of when I think of dogs are my dad's 5 Pekingese. They're about this big, and they will not fight you on under any circumstances, but they will bark all day. So you could say that
Bark.
dogs are also alarms.
Right.
Any notes on dogs as a potential solution?
Maintenance.
Maintenance. That's a good way of putting it. I'm pretty sure I spelled that wrong. Maintain. Yeah, that's right. So like food, water, love, the normal things.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Like 3 people raised their hands. I think Yi was the first one.
I think security providers like ADT, authorized provider, they provide like a security system, like an alarm system that alerts the police.
Great. Any notes?
They are quite pricey, I think. For some people, they may not be able to afford it. And I think also every time they alert the police, I think you have to pay a fee too after.
I cannot type today. Cool. If you raised your hand, just go for it. First person that talks, go for it.
I was gonna say motion sensors.
Motion sensors. Awesome. And what do they do?
Detect with motion.
Anything else?
They can probably like alert you in some way, like maybe like through an app or something.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine they're not going to be too useful if they just detect motion and then sit there and be like, all right, cool, job done.
Yeah.
Any notes?
They can be pricey.
Okay.
Also, it's important, like, where do you put it? Because you don't want to put it like in a place that's not going to be useful.
Right. Another thing that comes to my mind is, what if you also have dogs and or kids, or you have guests over and they trip the alarms, so it's
Yeah.
accidental tripping. Cool. Let's see. I think there was one more hand. Might not be raised anymore. Well, 4 or 5 is good enough to kind of get the point across. So, if you were doing this for a startup that you were working on, you would want to make this list super exhaustive. You're probably going to have to go through a lot of this brainstorming yourself, just you and your team. But it's also good to reach out to people who deal with this issue. Maybe someone who had to deal with a break-in. They might be a good person to talk to about, what was that experience like? What do they do now? Those sorts of things, to just get more ideas about, potential competitors and solutions. So with that, we'll go back into the presentation. Today's probably going to be a fairly short day. So yeah, I just realized we're only like 15 minutes in. So with that information, what you can begin to do is do some high-level competitor analysis. I say high-level because we're really only going to be talking about, like, what does the company do? What do we like about them? Things like that. We're not really going to be talking about their financials or their, market share or anything like that that might be included in a more detailed competitor analysis. So, identifying these competitors allows us to begin to answer more relevant questions about them, questions that can, help us think about our product, figure out, what are changes that we might want to make, what are directions that we might want to go in, what are directions that we might want to steer away from. This sort of information and analysis that's the purpose behind it. So the 4 questions that we're going to be addressing is, what are our competitors doing? And we already answered this, actually. And what advantages or features do we like about our competitor, about what they're doing? And conversely, what disadvantages or features do we not like? There's a typo. Oh well. And what conclusions can we draw? Based on this information, what direction should we head with our product? So back to the moats example. What do? They act as a physical barrier to the home. What do we like? Physical barriers can be pretty effective. You're not going to be able to jump over a 20-foot pit in the ground. Like, it's just not going to happen. Dislike, they're super impractical. You're not just going to dig a 20-foot pit in the ground. Like, it doesn't make sense. And then conclusions. While the physical barriers might be effective, customer adoption is probably not going to happen. You're not going to be able to get the permits. You're not going to get people to actually buy it unless they're, like, I don't know, Renaissance people who like to do that kind of stuff. And so with that said, moats are probably not a legitimate competitor. And, this feels silly because that's pretty obvious. Why would we consider moats an actual competitor? But I think what you'll find in a lot of situations, especially in situations where you're actually new to the industry, is that consumers will often use practices or items or products for varied purposes. A really good example of that is Q-tips. As I'm sure many of you have done, Q-tips are often used for cleaning your ears, right? It says directly on the box, do not use these to clean your ears. It expressly says you can't do that. Yet that's what a lot of people use for it. And we're all familiar with that, most likely. So perhaps that's not the best example of silly things can be legitimate, but it's along the same lines. So hopefully that helps get the point across. So we're going to head back over to the worksheet and start doing some of that. So we'll actually just copy over these ones. And let's get different people to comment on competitors that weren't necessarily theirs. So let's go down this list. Jane, what do you like about cameras as a solution?
It can give you pretty detailed information, like pretty rapidly, obviously, with images.
And dislikes?
It could be grainy, maybe not capture all that you want.
So with that, moving forward, what would you say about cameras as a conclusion?
Do you mean as a consumer or?
As someone who's entering this field as a company.
Okay. You want something to be able to capture as much as possible. I don't know. It's like weighing the pros and cons of being able to capture something as much as possible.
Okay. So I guess what I'm getting from that is, if we go along the same route as, gathering information, gathering images, we need to make sure that our information is of higher quality.
Yeah.
Cool. Dogs. Gracia?
Things that I like about them, I guess they're like a man's best friend.
I'm gonna say people's best friend.
You could also, I guess you could train them so they could also like protect your home, which is supposed to be like a safe place for you.
So like a dual purpose dog,
Yeah. And then,
cuddles by day, guards by night.
yeah.
Cool.
And then dislikes, I guess again, like the maintenance, but that's pretty much all I could think of.
Okay. One thing I can think of is if you get a dog that's like meant for like being a guard dog, like a Rottweiler, they might be hostile towards you, or even like small children is a huge issue. Like I have a husky and she can't be around small anything because she gets hungry. And so what conclusions can you draw from that?
I guess there's like places that train dogs, so you could take them like how you said if you had like a Rottweiler, like I guess you could take them so they could not be so aggressive. And then the other way around, like if you have a dog that isn't so aggressive, you could also train it to be more aggressive.
Okay. So maybe the direction we want to go is for people who already have dogs, how do we make sure that these owners get the best of both worlds? Is that what you're going along?
Yeah.
Or, okay. Cool. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Caden, do you want to talk about ADT or other authorized security providers? I will take that as a no. Lauren. Rip. What's up, Parth?
I was thinking maybe something bad would be they might be expensive. Good thing is that they're very efficient.
What do you
That's
mean
just
by efficient?
because they're professionals.
I'm not sure is what ADT is, but it seems like it's like a well-developed system.
Yeah, basically it's like an alarm for your home or business.
Oh,
You'll see
okay.
them on like front yards, like this house is secured by ADT or
I
whatever
see.
other company.
So I guess there's more credibility. People trust the.
Okay. So the reason why I question on efficiency is efficiency I usually kind of associate with how much effort you have to put in to execute a job. Well, that probably is the case actually. But I more, at least with what you're talking about, like, their experience, I would associate that more with effectiveness. They're really good at their job.
Definitely.
Realistically, they're both. Cool. And what conclusions might you draw from that?
If I have the money to actually like buy a product, then I would probably use ADT. Otherwise, I would go for cheaper alternatives.
For
I
sure.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, if you have the money, it's a great thing. It does what you want. It does the job well. So, hey, why not spend the money on that? If you're looking for a job to be done right, then and you're able to get it done right, then you're going to.
Absolutely.
Cool. Last one, Ashley.
I think motion sensors, I think the issue with them is that I feel like they're not very accurate. Like, for example, I have motion sensors that go off in my house and like by the windows. And if we have an object by it, it could set it off.
Okay. Anything good?
I think they're hidden pretty well. So like, they're just like not very obvious in the home, which I think is a good thing.
Okay. Yeah, you don't want to be constantly reminded, being in your home of all these issues around security. And any conclusions?
I think overall they're pretty useful, but I personally feel like there are better options.
For sure. Yeah, if I were a consumer, and this is, just me, but if I'm thinking, maybe I should get some equipment in my home for security, if I'm getting motion sensors and I'm spending the money on that, I'm probably also just going to go with a full system. So I might lean over towards, ADT or some other provider. Cool. So what we would do now, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about it, is based on a lot of these conclusions, as a team, or if you were a sole founder, you'd kind of talk through what do these conclusions point towards? What are potential ventures that you can pursue, that you're both qualified to pursue, as well as, really improve on a job that other people are not doing well with, or hitting a niche that hasn't quite been addressed yet. Talking about this example with the dogs, I think this is a really interesting conclusion that I think Grecia came up with, if I remember correctly. training is something like training the dog that you already have, or for either to be more friendly or to be more, to do different jobs for you. That's really interesting to me because it's something that it's an ongoing product. It's almost like you could push it towards maybe a subscription model. It's recurring, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And then also it's kind of just something that any responsible owner should do. And something that I don't necessarily see a lot of. There's certainly dog trainers out there and small companies, small businesses that do dog training. But in my experience, I haven't seen a whole lot of widespread companies that have really capitalized on this. So what you might want to do is go through all the conclusions that you've drawn, go through any additional information that you've picked up on your prior research, and try to figure out, what is the path that I think is best for me and for my company. So let's see, there is a comment thingy. Oh, accurate, cool. Sorry, I was just reading the chat. And we are back. Cool. So some final notes. I did say this was going to be short. It is still pretty short. So with the conclusions from your competitor analysis, you might want to refine your product. You're probably going to have an idea, maybe even an MVP, minimum viable product at this point. But you're certainly not our market. It's pretty important to start looking at competitors pretty early on, because if you already have a product and you're already trying to sell, and then you find out like, oh hey, there's someone already doing the same thing, or there's this other player in the field that's doing the same job as me but in a different way, and it's really taking up my business, then you're not going to have a good day, because you're going to have to pivot too early. You might have to change your product or change your strategy in a way that is really a waste of time, all things considered. And with that said, this process is really only meant for your initial product. You should always be aware of competitors, but you don't necessarily want to be doing this every month, for the first year. This is really something that you're going to do once, maybe twice, pretty exhaustively, and then use that as like an initial guiding ramp towards success. Your product is going to be revised. It's going to be iterated on if you're doing a good job. And once you're iterating, once you're refining your actual physical product or service, or digital, if you're doing something computer-based, it's really not so much your own mind that you should be listening to, but your customers. So I hope this has been informative. If you have any questions, I will be on for a while longer. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Dominic. I did have some questions. So I'm new to the whole UC Davis Student Startup Center. I'm kind of just looking at the your website, and trying to figure out how things work. But I know that you mentioned that you have what this is working towards is a project, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you call it again?
Yeah, so sorry for not adequately plugging that. So this series
because I joined second. This is your second workshop or third?
Third, yes.
Third, okay. Yeah.
So this series, and then the MVP series, which is going to start week 7, if I remember correctly, are progressing towards Startup Week. It's a 5-day long business competition, May 25th to 29th. It's all virtual, obviously. And the curriculum for this series is directly applicable to the business case portion of that competition. So the idea behind this is if you attend these workshops or later on, if you watch them, via YouTube or wherever we end up putting it on, you're going to have a lot of good information that can help you more efficiently produce those business cases.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And so where can I find like the eligibility for competition or register for competition?
So that will be available soon. The whole
Okay.
What's the word? Sign up sheet. In terms of eligibility, our only like hard fast requirement is that you're a student.
Okay. Cool.
Or at the very least that you're a part of a team that is mostly made up of students or recent grads.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you're forming a team. Is that right?
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, I'd have to double check, but teams are 2 to 5. It might be 3 to 5.
Okay. Yeah, all right, cool. So I'll just keep in touch. I've just joined the Slack channel, and then
Cool.
I'll wait to see more information. Cool. Thanks for the
Awesome.
introduction, and thanks for the webinar.
For sure. Thank you.
All right, speak soon. Bye.
Bye.